SUV coupes, they're the flavor of the season. We've got the Tata Curve, we've got the Citroën Basalt, and now we've got this. This is the Mercedes-AMG GLC 43 Coupe, or Coupe, whatever you want to call it. The GLC 43 is an important car for AMG in India. It is, after all, the best-selling AMG in India. And now it's back in an all-new generation. The new generation has allowed Mercedes to do a lot with it in terms of the dynamics, in terms of the performance, in terms of the interiors. Sure, the 4-cylinder now replaces the older V6, but I promise you, it's not a compromise. This is still a very quick car. Welcome to Evo India and welcome to our first drive review of the Mercedes-Benz GLC 43. Before we go ahead, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Evo India channel and leave a comment down below. Would you prefer an SUV coupe over a standard SUV? I'd love to know. Let's start by talking about styling, because the rear end of this GLC 43 Coupe is definitely one of its highlights. The way the roof swoops down smoothly, the way it kicks out at the end with this boot lip spoiler, it looks really good. You've got the AMG badge, the GLC 43 badge on either side, and down below you've got this really aggressive looking bumper, quad pipe stuck in there with another aggressive diffuser. Honestly, the rear end looks very chunky, but it doesn't come at the expense of the overall form of the car. I still think it looks very proportional, very nice, a lot more proportional than the older GLC 43. On the side, 21-inch AMG wheels. These wheels look really cool in the flesh, very detailed. You've got a footboard that runs the width of the car. Not so useful in my opinion, it's not too high. You've got the turbo electrified badge on the side, which talks about the engine, which we'll get to in a bit. And from the front, typical AMG, you've got the Pan Americana grille up front, you've got the AMG crest on the nose, you've got really aggressive bumpers, and you've got very cool aero elements on the side. I'd be scared of nicking these in traffic, honestly, but it looks very cool. Overall, the GLC 43 looks a lot tighter than before. It's still got that coupe-like form, it's still an SUV, but it's a lot tighter than before. It looks a lot meaner, a lot more proportional than before, and in this silver Magno paint, it looks phenomenally good in the flesh.
Put me on the altar 'cause you can't be tamed. Silence underneath your flame.
Step inside the GLC 43 Coupe and it's familiar, but it's different. It's familiar because this is the general GLC layout. You've got your 12.3-inch instrument cluster, you've got your 11.9-inch infotainment screen, which is portrait oriented. The layout is very familiar, but it's been AMG-fied. So you've got red stitching on the upholstery, you've got red seat belts, which look very cool. You've got this faux carbon fiber finish over here, but the highlight has to be the steering wheel. This steering wheel has carbon fiber, real carbon fiber inlays in it, and it feels really nice to hold. Being an AMG, you also get your drive mode selector right on the steering wheel. The right one, it selects your overall drive mode. The left one allows you to manipulate individual characteristics like your exhaust, your suspension, your start-stop system, your traction control, all of that. You've got nice chunky paddle shifters, which are really tactile, very nice to use. And in terms of equipment, it is reasonably well equipped. You've got a head-up display, you've got a sunroof, not a panoramic sunroof because that puts you into headroom at the rear, coupe roofline, remember. You've also got a 15-speaker Burmester audio system, 710 watts. You've got heated seats, but you don't have cooled seats. And that's something I would have liked to see in the GLC 43 Coupe. In the summer, our conditions are really hot. It's not a warm day today, so I'm not missing it. But in the summer, cooled seats would have been very welcome. But honestly, today I don't care if my backside is a little sweaty. We've got an AMG hand-built engine under the hood. We've got race mode. It's time to let it rip. Okay, the driving. Let's start with the engine package that the GLC 43 comes with. I know a lot of y'all are probably upset that the V6 is gone and in comes a 4-cylinder. But let me tell you, you shouldn't be upset. This is a really strong, really sporty 4-cylinder engine. It's a 2-liter unit, similar to what you get in the C43, and it comes mated to an electric exhaust turbocharger. Now, what does that mean? Turbochargers are usually spun up by the exhaust gases. So what is the electrical component doing in there? Well, there's a tiny electric motor right in the heart of the turbo between the intake side and the exhaust side. And this electric motor can spin up at low revs, basically freeing the turbocharger from being dependent on only the exhaust gases. So when the revs are high, the turbocharger works as usual. But when the revs are low and when you need to pick up the speed, it spins up with the electric motor and essentially negates lag and just adds to the amount of performance that it has. It's also a really large turbo, and large turbos have a lot of lag, but putting this electric motor in the heart of it can really remove all of that lag. The end result, a lot of power, 415 bhp, which is more powerful than the V6 that it replaces, and 500 Nm of torque. Performance is rapid. Okay, not V8 brutal, but it is really rapid. And what I like is this engine. It feels really racy. It feels really aggressive. It feels on it. It doesn't feel like it's in a lazy state of tune, but it feels like a performance engine. And that's what I like about it so much. It may be smaller, but it feels angry. In comfort mode, you just have a wave of torque to carry you along to 3-digit speeds, but things get really exciting when you dial it up through Sport Plus, and you hit race mode. This is the first time the GLC 43 has race mode, and not all AMGs have race mode. It's really special. It dials everything to the max. The exhaust gets a little louder. Sure, it's pumped in through the speakers a little bit, but it does get louder on the outside as well. The gearbox, it gets more aggressive. It gives you a little thunk in the head every time you shift gears, whether you're going up the gearbox or down it. The responses from the engine are very quick. Again, because the electric turbocharger, you do not have lag, so you can step on it and get instantaneous responses. It's not EV responsive, but it doesn't need to be EV responsive. This is really good. And along with that, the dynamic package tightens up as well. We're back to this engine. Really refined, really smooth, sounds nice. Just puts a massive smile on your face while doing it. We're conditioned to believe that 4 cylinders are mundane, 4 cylinders are normal. But when it's mated to something like this, a 48 volt battery with a belt driven starter motor and this electric turbo, whew, I promise you, you're going to be smiling. It's hard to keep up at the speed limit. You just want to go beyond, and it goes beyond so effortlessly. Now, chassis. Let me dial it back to comfort for a second. The GLC 43 has always been a popular car because of the balance it has, the dynamic balance that it has. It's always been able to be comfortable as well as sporty, and that's what makes it so good. And that continues with this update. Put it into comfort mode and it's reasonably comfortable. Obviously, it's not going to be as soft as your standard GLC. This is a proper AMG after all. So it is firm, but it's never uncomfortable. You know, you can drive it over a regular Indian road and it will deal with it pretty well. You're not going to be complaining about a sore back by the end of it. But should you dial it up? You dial it up to Sport or Sport Plus, and things do get firmer. In race, it's really firm. You will feel it. This does have dynamic dampers, and it does make a difference which driving mode you're in. So race mode, I wouldn't recommend it for any road except a really smooth expressway or a really smooth highway, because otherwise you're just going to be very uncomfortable in the car. Keep it in comfort most of the time, but you find a good road, put it into a race mode, and you can have so much fun. The big change, the biggest change is rear wheel steer, and it makes a world of difference. It steers up to 2.5 degrees, not as massive as something like the S-Class with rear wheel steer. But that 2.5 degrees does make the GLC 43 so nimble on turn-in. You know, it doesn't feel lazy, it doesn't feel heavy. It just darts into corners very positively. The steering is nice. Feel is okay, but it feels very direct and it has great weight. You know, you feel so connected to the front end. And because that rear wheel steer is virtually shortening the wheelbase, it just feels so quick and nimble and so much fun in the corners. This is the most fun GLC 43 that I've driven to date. Another trick that the GLC 43 has up its sleeve is dynamic engine mounts. What this essentially does is the engine mounts, they can change from very stiff to soft depending on which drive mode you're in. In comfort mode, they'll be in a softer state of tune, which essentially damps the engine better, so it reduces NVH in the cabin, but it will have a negative impact on handling because the engine might flex or move in its mounts a little bit more than it should. Dial it to a more sportier mode and the engine mounts stiffen up, and what that allows you to do is basically tie the engine down a little bit better. So when you're chucking it around corners, when you're accelerating and braking hard, the engine doesn't have its own momentum and it's more tied down to the chassis. It does have a small negative impact on NVH, but honestly, when you're in race mode, the exhaust is so loud that you don't really feel a negative impact on the NVH. But you chuck it into a bend in race mode, so much traction coming out of corners. This is all-wheel drive. It is an SUV after all. And it's a rear-biased all-wheel drive system, so it's not pulling wide. You can stand on the gas, just have it claw you out of the corner. You can really manhandle this GLC and it will just comply. The limits are quite high. You've got to be pushing really hard to get the tires to squeal because the mechanical grip from this is just so high. It's such a dynamic poised chassis. I'm surprised, usually we talk about BMWs with such high praise for their handling, but the GLCs really hit the sweet spot over here when it comes to dynamic poise. So hard to complain about this car, genuinely so hard to criticize it. It really does everything well. You've got the ground clearance to deal with Indian roads, you've got the comfort in comfort mode, you've got the sportiness in race mode. Okay, you don't have the bragging rights. You show up with this car to your friends and they're just going to say, I have 4 cylinders. But don't take them seriously because these 4 cylinders are some very serious 4 cylinders. What I also like about the GLC is it's not too big, it's not too large like an EQE or a GLE 53. Those are big cars which make them a little difficult to drive around town in the city. This is something you can daily in the city because it's not too wide, it's not too long. It is a big car, but it's not excessively big, and that means you can use it on the daily, drive it in the city and not face an issue in terms of the sheer width or size of the car. Something that's also a bit annoying at higher speeds is wind noise. 110, 120 kilometers an hour, you hear a fair bit of it. And in fact, one of the photographers was sitting in the car earlier and he thought one of the windows were open because there was a fair bit of wind noise coming in. Windows were shut. It's just the way this thing is designed and the way it hits the wind that causes a little bit of buffeting.
We already have a day tonight. We already have a day tonight. To live and never pray, to claim never die.
So there you have it, the Mercedes-Benz GLC 43 Coupe. It's such a well-rounded, such a capable machine. It's fast, it's comfortable enough, it's got great interiors, it looks really good, it's got the ground clearance for Indian conditions. As a fast performance car for Indian roads, there's nothing quite like the GLC Coupe, and that's really what led to its success in its last generation. But there was one more piece of the puzzle that made it so popular, and that was the price. The older GLC 43, it was a CKD, priced somewhere in the region of 75 to 76 lakh rupees ex-showroom. This one here is going to come in as a CBU. We expect the prices to be somewhere between 1.1 to 1.2 crores rupees ex-showroom. And that's a lot more. It really takes away from the value proposition that the GLC 43 always was. Sure, it's a lot more capable, it's faster, it's better on the inside, it's more luxurious, you've got more tech that makes it more better to handle. It's got a lot going for it, but that critical component, that value, is not going to be as appealing. Now, what's left to be seen is if you guys, the guys who are actually out there buying AMGs, lap this up in as many numbers.
Never die.